guys, welcome back to yet another episode of PopWind, where we're going to talk about trauma in movies. And both Avi and Siddhant here are going to be the hosts. And then me, Janvi, and Jasmine are going to be there. And then we're going to give out our opinions. And then, yeah, it's going to be a good conversation and probably knowledgeable. At the end of the day, maybe you'll want to go watch those two movies and then give out
We
your
hope you do.
opinion. Yeah, we hope you do, and please use the comment section out there on YouTube. Just use constructive criticism and make sure that you give out your opinions, because that's going to help us in future as well. Let's get started.
Okay, so yeah, guys, today's like we discussed earlier, today's topic is trauma, and I think the first movie that we'll be tackling is this film called "You Were Never Really Here," which stars Joaquin Phoenix and is directed by Lynn Ramsey. I think Avi will be able to give us a better summary of the film. Uh,
Okay, so this is just an IMDb summary here. So, a traumatized veteran unafraid of violence tracks down missing girls for a living. When a job spins out of control, Joe's nightmares, who is played by Joaquin Phoenix, overtake him as a conspiracy is uncovered, leading to what may be his death trip or his awakening. So that's the
yeah.
basic summary, but obviously the movie is a lot more when it comes to tackling trauma.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I think I've always realized that summaries never do like the film justice.
Yeah,
Like
this is just to
it kind of,
explain, just like a brief description
yeah,
of what we are actually talking
yeah,
about. And
yeah,
this
yeah,
movie came
and
out in 2017.
yeah, yeah, and the thing is that I always feel that some films can't even be described in its summary. But yeah, so to like reiterate what Avi said, it's basically about Joe, who is like you can call him a mercenary almost. So he gets paid to do certain tasks, and he's an ex-army guy, which is hinted at throughout the film. It's never directly told to you; it's always hinted at. And his job now as a mercenary is usually he goes and saves, people who have been human trafficked, right? Or like especially young girls. So now the film deals with trauma, and I think one of the first questions that we have leading up to that is, what does trauma mean to you? And I would like to go to Bhavya first
Okay,
about.
so I think so. As Avi mentioned, a lot of summaries doesn't do a good job while they describe a movie. So I think at the end of the day, trauma is much more than what one person thinks when they see the summary that's given, like a short summary given by probably IMDb or some other website online. So trauma includes, so it is like, so I don't know, but there's this one assumption that I hear from people. So it's like they say, okay, trauma is for people who are not low. So they be like, okay, trauma is more visible, like you can see trauma sort of thing. But when I watch movies like this, it feels like you can't see trauma and you can't judge a person and you can't see what is happening in their life. Trauma can be from your childhood, or maybe about the thing that's never happened, or maybe it can come suddenly. So you can't just describe trauma in one sentence, but if you have to do, it is an invisible thing that you cannot see, but a person goes through it daily, like regularly. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, Avi, what does trauma mean to you?
So I think my definition of trauma is pretty straightforward. It's not as intense as we see it in this movie, which we'll come to later. But for me, it's basically like it's like a terrifying experience that you may have had recently or previously, or probably will have. That stayed with me for a long time, which I normally like. It's always there in my mind, and when I think about it, I'm like, oh, it's that was a terrifying experience, and it's still when I think about it's a terrifying experience. So I'll give an example. This is it's very funny when I think about it now, but it still was a terrifying experience for me as a child. So when I think this is in 2008 when Amir Khan's Gajni came out, and of course I was an 8-year-old back then, and I watched this movie in theaters. Probably shouldn't have, but I didn't know it was Amir Khan. I liked Amir Khan. Whatever I went, my parents also took me to the theater. So what happened is that I thought this was gonna be a movie like Tare Zameen Par, and boy, this went, it just went on a completely different curve. And the first scene where we see Amir Khan killing people, that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, I cannot watch this. I was telling my mom, please, can I please leave the theater? I don't want to watch this right now. And she was just like, no, wait, sit, it's okay, you can watch it. I'm like, okay. And I was trying to cover my eyes the entire time. And it was pretty terrifying. And the movie ended like in the middle. There were good few nice scenes in the middle of his the flashbacks were pretty nice, so that was okay to handle. After the movie, now this is where the trauma comes in a little bit for me. This was trauma for me. It might not be for you, but for me. So I couldn't sleep at all that night at all. So it was like I used to sleep in my grandmother's room, and my brother also would sleep in my grandmother's room. So right next to my bed, there used to be a suitcase. Okay. And at night when all the lights were off, it felt like Amir Khan was standing right next to me, and I was so scared that I just could not sleep at night at all. Even the next day, I was thinking the same thing. Oh, this movie was so violent. How it's just, I couldn't, it was like something that I still remember it. And there are many things that I don't remember from such a long time. But yeah, so that's basically sums it up what I feel.
Right. Right. Janvi, would you like to go next?
Sure. So, like, I'll just put it out there. My understanding of trauma is pretty recent because almost for my whole life, I understood trauma through like a very physical and medical perspective. I always saw my father rushing to the trauma room, and I thought, like, yeah, that's what it is. It's just physical injury, which it does mean. But when I came to college, I think that was the time when I understood that, oh, trauma is much more than that, and it affects you mentally, and anything which is very disturbing could affect you in a way that which can define you eventually. So I think trauma for me is that any major event which I feel, maybe other people may not feel it as disturbing it was, but for me, if it is disturbing, it affects me, and it affects future relationships that I have. If it affects what kind of a person I am, I think that is traumatic, and that is trauma for me. So
Right. Do you have like a dictionary definition?
yeah, so basically,
Yeah, I should probably add here that this is explicitly for our viewers so that they can understand like at least the dictionary definition better. So yeah.
So basically, trauma is in medicine. It is physical injury. Okay, and in wait a second. I'm sorry. Just a second. Someone's in my room. I cannot just
Okay.
right now.
Avi, you'll edit this part out, right? You're mute. You're just mute.
Hero Berry Bagal.
No, that's my grandmom. She got
Oh.
something for me to eat.
I'll start it off again.
Yeah. No, it's
Just a
okay.
second.
I can just edit this.
No, I'll start from the point when I was going
No,
to say.
I'll ask you that point first, and then you can continue.
Okay.
So, Jhanvi, do you have like a dictionary definition for us so that we can explicitly tell our viewers what trauma is? A dictionary definition, to be precise.
Yeah. So, as I said, in medicine, what trauma means is just physical injury. But what it exactly means, if you just look it up on Google, what you will get a result is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience is what trauma is. Like, if you just want to put it in simple words. But I think the reason these guys are asking this question is because trauma is something that could be different for almost everybody. No one
Right.
person experiences it in the same way, just like no one person experiences other emotions in the same way.
Right. Right. Makes sense.
Okay,
Jasmine.
we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah. So, like, if you want to put it very simply, trauma is simply a bad experience which can affect us mentally and physically or both. But that bad experience is multiplied by 1,000 times, almost crippling our own, like the present we live in. So for me, that is it. And also, it trauma can like stem from different things. It depends on your physical strength, on mental strength, or how personal the experience was for you, because see, one experience might be traumatic for me and might not be traumatic for someone else. So we might have the, like Millie said, it's the same point actually. Yeah, that one person perceives it in one way while the other does in another. So that's basically it, to put it very simply.
Okay. Um, Guys, wait, Jasmine, are you okay?
Yeah, what happened?
Oh, shit. I was I the only one who felt that she was crying.
No, no.
Yeah,
uh,
Oh, when she gets a little passionate, you can hear it in her voice. That is.
Yeah, like
Okay.
the heavy. So
that's
yeah.
so
Okay, because
nice.
I
That
genuinely,
it gets a little heavier. Yes,
I
that's true.
genuinely thought she was crying. I freaked out. Okay, like
Oh,
I got
no,
worried.
I'm just
I thought you
I'm
had some
just
story
thinking too
to share.
much.
No, I
I said she just got
genuinely
too
got
passionate
worried,
about it.
dude. Like I was
Oh,
like, shit, dude. This I think we uncovered some trauma of Jasmine's, and now she's crying about. I was
No,
like,
no.
oh no.
no, but you had a good point. That was,
Yeah, yeah, that
yeah.
was a good point, though. Yeah, Jasmine.
And if people do think that you're crying, it's better.
I think they
Oh,
will.
thank you.
I think they will because like
That's
I
good.
thought you were crying, and I was
That's good.
like,
We need that
damn.
emotion. We need that emotion.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Avi, you
Guys,
will have
I
a lot
was
to cut
wait.
out in the middle.
That's okay. I already do
Yeah.
that for other videos.
So if I can just add like a quick point, since all of you have already given such good points, yeah, I think if we talk about Avi's case in particular, obviously that's a very mild form of trauma. The trauma that you see in and again to our viewers, when you watch You Were Never Really Here, that kind of trauma is a different kind of trauma. On it's like on a next level altogether, because this is the kind of trauma that, again, to pull from what Janvi said, like trauma is not physical. There is physical trauma, which is like wounds or bruises or cuts or whatever you can see on the body physically, but internal trauma cannot be seen. It haunts the person for their entire life. It might plague them, and I think therapy is probably the only way that it can even be healed to some extent. There is no complete cure for trauma. uh, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, is a form of trauma which a lot of soldiers get, because when and it wasn't even identified for several years. Very recently only have we started realizing that PTSD is a real thing. When they go for war, when they go into that battle, they see their comrades die, they have to take other people's lives. It's all fun and games when we see one person taking another person's life in movies or TV shows, but it's not as easy to do that in real life, uh, and it have
Can I?
yeah.
One
Yeah,
thing I
sure.
want to add, even though traditionally now, like in popular opinion, now we related PTSD, we related to soldiers.
Yeah, yeah.
One point I think one of our professors brought it up. There are a lot of journalists, war
Yeah, yeah.
journalists, or people who are
True.
reporting on places that which are not, ideal, and I don't know how to,
Yeah.
like, which are just grim, and
Yeah, yeah,
which
of course.
experience of those in reality.
Yeah, yeah. So as we were talking, like adding to Jani's point about journalists, yeah, of course, journalists in like war-torn areas, or journalists who have to, report on eh, places of conflict, where they see violence actively happening. And another thing is that journalists obviously can't get involved in what is happening, right? They are only there to report. So a lot of times there's even the guilt, which also manifests as trauma, as to the fact that you couldn't do anything about, maybe like saving someone's life, or something that extreme, because you're unable to do anything at the moment. You're just there to report. And yeah, so like Jhanvi was very right when she brought up the fact that there is a lot of trauma that journalists face as well. It's not just army people. In fact, a lot of women also face trauma based on encounters of sexual harassment, based on rape. You know, it all leaves a very negative effect inside their minds. So, in fact, if I can add something more, like again, I don't mean to just focus on PTSD, but there's a point which I wanted to add to that. PTSD, it has been found scientifically by doing X-rays that people who go through PTSD, the cerebral cortex in their, or the prefrontal lobe in their mind, it actually uh, becomes smaller in size, you know, uh, because of the trauma. It gets affected by it. And yeah, that obviously is not good for the person. And yeah, they suffer from trauma throughout.
Also,
And
Siddhant,
yeah,
yeah, since we're talking about PTSD, I also want to add, like, we're talking about war or like sexual harassment. These are considered like bad experiences or sad events. But even giving birth, new mothers go through PTSD. That's postpartum, post PTSD. So it's not always necessary that childbirth is also not always a happy experience.
if we come to, this is my last point on it, if we come to like our main character, there is even parental abuse, which you know Joe goes through, which is abuse from his father, right? And it's not just one way. There are characters who face abuse. There are obviously a lot of, mostly it is shown that the male parent abuses, but there is also female abuse which happens, and that can also lead to trauma. In fact, if any of you have seen a film called Split, uh, the main character suffers from abuse from his mother. Yeah, anyway, so moving on. Our second question, I think Avi has.
So yeah, now that I hope the definition what trauma actually means is clear to our viewers or listeners. So let's go on to movies now. So the two movies that we watched, again, we'll just repeat this, are Hereditary, which came out in 2018, and You Were Never Really Here, which came out in 2017. So let's what do you guys feel about the movie? Let's start with Janvi. What do you feel about the movie? We can start talking about Hereditary.
So let me just start by saying I don't really love horror as a genre. I love watching it. I love doing like just being scared after it, but I don't know what I feel about it. Anyways, like coming back to the movies, I enjoyed Hereditary because of its performances more than anything else. The performances are amazing, and the movie revolves around this family, and I don't know how to explain the storyline. I'm sorry, I can't do that. But
That's all right. I'll do it after you're done speaking.
yeah, so maybe you should start with that, and then we all can give our point of views.
Okay, so I'll give a brief IMDb description of the movie. I agree with you that it's a very confusing movie to talk about, but we'll explain why we picked this for this episode. So the IMDb description is: when a mentally ill mother passes away, a woman named Annie, played by Toni Collette, and her husband, played by Gabriel Byrne, son Alex Wolff, played by Alex Wolff, and daughter, played by Emily Shapiro, all mourn her loss. The family turn to different means to handle their grief, including Annie and her daughter, both linked with some supernatural force. They each begin to have disturbing otherworldly experiences linked to the sinister secrets and emotional trauma that have been passed through the generations of their family. Now, reading this description, I could understand how tough it is to write a description for this movie. It's very difficult, and you probably didn't understand at all what this movie is about. But
Yeah.
I don't think we can go deep into what this movie is about, since you guys have to watch it to understand it, because there's like a whole other level to talk about when about this movie. But
One of
yeah,
those
we
movies
just
that you have to see to understand.
yeah
Of course.
we can't really explain it, because that's another episode altogether. But we're just
Yeah,
going to start
yeah.
talking about what we feel about the movie. So Janvi, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so continuing where I left, I think that this movie doesn't really, go deep into the trauma aspect of the things. I do kind of enjoyed this sub layer kind of where they portrayed this like some mental illness that might be passed through the generations, and the whole aspect that the like one of the main characters in the movie, um, who Peter, right? So he was that he had trauma because there was this one time his mother tried to like burn herself and him together while she was sleepwalking. And so I think like trauma is not the main thing in this movie. This is a movie that mainly like focuses on, I don't know, the cult aspect of it, the demonic
We'll
aspect of it.
we'll come to more how trauma is portrayed in like later, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so particularly watching this movie with keeping this discussion in mind, I can't say a lot about it, but I can say that performances were amazing. I loved. This is one of those rare movies that I loved, even though the genre I don't agree with. But yeah, and do you want me to tell you about You Were Never Really Here right now, or like should we discuss that afterwards?
Mm, I think we can do it after. Actually, no. Let's just do it now. Let's just do it all together. You can describe both of them.
Okay, so and coming to You Were Never Really Here, I loved that movie. I really, really enjoyed that movie. I think I think one of the things that I loved was the visual representation of everything. So this is a thing that I have with most of the movies that try to portray trauma in them, even though not a lot do. But you can't explain it with words always, and I think what this movie does is show you how how a person who has PTSD behaves, how he functions, and from his point of view how the world looks. There are several points in the whole movie where you can just see Joe go into this one flashback of something that happened, and even though in a traditional movie aspect that is good for exposition, but in this movie it's not that, because half of the times you can't even understand what that flashback is. So but this is one thing that how it is. And the one very interesting thing that I found out while researching for this movie, that while preparing for the role, Joaquin Phoenix was given um, audio with fireworks, and then the director told him, listen to this and imagine listening to this always. And like this sound is something that is going to become the background sound to everything you do, even while you're sleeping you're dreaming of this sound. And you then just like you crave for that moment of silence. Like for a while it's fine, you can tune it out, but after a while it just becomes unbearable. And I think that is one of like that choice that the director made to describe the actor how he has to act is a very interesting thing she did. And even if you look at the way she kind of explained the role, so I went deep into the research stuff, and the way she kind of explained the roles, the way she you know the way she handled the camera, the way the frame was made, because you don't fully see Joe all the time because you can't understand him. That's just what it is. You can't understand the trauma that he has been through. You can't understand. You can see fragments of it. That is what we see. The most disturbing images, like his abuse when he was a kid,
I'm
the
sorry to
kind.
stop you there, but you can carry this
Yeah.
forward when we actually come to the trauma
Okay.
portrayal in these movies. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you for your input. But Bhavya, you can tell us your.
I think largely Janvi covered most of it all this while, but I just want to add one point. So recently there's this one movie that was released, Taapsi's movie called Game Over, if
Mm,
anyone have watched it.
yeah.
It was released in all languages like Telugu, Hindi, and English, and most of it. Not English, sorry, my bad, Hindi, and then all other regional languages. And so I don't wanna share the entire plot here, but at the end of the day, the movie basically talks about how trauma is portrayed. For example, okay, there are these four characters which are not shown. Who are they? Where are they from? What is happening is not shown on screen. So there are like four people with what should I say? A black coat like that. And then, so if you try to imagine your traumas in those four people, that is what is happening on screen. So just to connect that movie with Hereditary, I just want to say these scenes that are happening, whatever I tried to watch looked like a traumatic experience more than a story. Like there are like few subplots where a trauma experience is happening, and then you can see trauma there. More than a horror film, it was like a psychological thing that's happening on screen. So if you take, for example, Peter's brain, uh, his perception to that one particular scene is different from that of his father's perception. So it's like they try to personify trauma. Like, if I'm making sense, it looked like they're trying to show trauma in whatever subplot they're taking. So that's what Hereditary was to me. And then coming to You're Never Really Here, it was more of relationships, and then what was happening between people, and more like whatever the episodes that happened in the main character's life. So whatever Janvi tried to explain, it was more of that. So yes, but yeah, at the end of the day, what I want to tell is, on screen you see how trauma is a very minute thing, but it's gonna destroy lives. That is what Hereditary is gonna tell you mostly. Yes.
Okay.
If I can add to what Bhavya just said, your perception of both of those movie is complete opposite of mine. I thought that Hereditary was totally about the family relation and how that worked, and then um, uh, You Were Never Really Here was about trauma. And I think this kind of represents the fact that all of us perceive trauma in a very different way.
Yeah,
This is a
exactly.
very good example of that. That for me, I think, those flashbacks, those sudden moments of going back to that thing, doing your very normal thing, your normal job, looking at just staring out of the window and thinking about this. I think that is a very good representation of trauma for me personally. But for Bhavya here, that could not be it. For her, the representation of Hereditary could be a good one.
Yeah. Okay, Jasmine.
I think both of them covered both the points actually, but I agree with Janvi a bit more because uh, also I want to add to that point. Hereditary shows trauma which may lead to mental instability or like going into things like the cult thing or finding ways to overcome trauma.
Spoilers.
You didn't you say that earlier?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, but not only Peter, but the mother, Annie, even she has a lot of trauma, like with her mother, father, and brother, her family history. So, yeah. And talking about You Were Never Really Here, I think that shows us that trauma, anyone can go through trauma, like Bhavya in the beginning said, that it can be in plain sight and you won't know what that person is going through, because when Joe is walking around the streets, no one would see his trauma. But then the way the movie is shot with the flashbacks and everything, that is, I think, what trauma basically an example of how trauma can be shown. Yeah, that's it. Also, the use of the sounds and music was really great, and You Were Never Really
Yeah.
Here. It helped with the whole plot, I think.
Okay.
Love
Yeah.
that. Like, again, I think that I'm gonna like just repeat myself here, but the intensification of the music, like
Yeah,
the,
exactly
the,
that.
the, the tempo of the music, how it just intensifies. Yeah, I'm
No, there is
got
one
It
dialogue.
helped understand, I think, the trauma that he was.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's I don't know, but I just want to add it here. So when his mother says, "I want space," he's like, "Go downstairs and like take your space." So like that was one dialogue that made me think. I was like, okay, maybe it's time to not assume that someone is not going through something or going through something just looking at them. It's like you have to understand there's much more to it. So yeah, I think those small dialogues like do impact a person in long run.
Okay. Siddhant, you want to tell us what you feel about the movies?
Yeah, I think uh, basically what I would like to say about Hereditary. I mean, we've mostly covered almost everything by with regards to you were never really here. Um, I think Hereditary. So earlier, while we were discussing, Jhanvi had mentioned that you know mental health is an umbrella term even now, right? And it's still not clearly defined, but that is what we're trying to do over here. We're trying to make at least some amount of distinction that we can, so that our listeners or our viewers can understand better that they're not one and the same thing. This we're still like, even psychologists and mental health experts are still figuring out how to differentiate them, right? So, I mean, of course, Hereditary is not exactly about trauma the way that You Were Never Really Here is, but I think that Hereditary is about grief. It's about grief and a lot of a lot of relationship issues, especially a dysfunctional family dynamic, which is shown to us with, of course, the element of horror inside it. But if you take away all of the elements of horror and you dissect the film, it's basically a story about a dysfunctional family. And I think that can also it may not exactly be trauma, but that comes underneath the umbrella of mental health issues and problems. So yeah, definitely. I think grief is a much bigger factor that plays a part in Hereditary. That's basically what I have to say about You Were Never Really Here. I think everyone's covered like all the points. I think the points about the music was a really good point that Jasmine brought up. So yeah.
I'd like to point out here, so like I'll tell you what I feel about the movies, but I don't think we mentioned this before, but the reason why we picked Hereditary are from like and not other movies is because that's the closest thing that I feel is has come to trauma other than You Were Never Really Here. Because while we were researching for this podcast, there were not a lot of trauma movies, and we also did a survey and on Instagram, and we were getting a lot of suggestions. But those movies are more about mental health and not about trauma. We'll talk about how they're different in the next question. But I just wanted to add here there aren't many movies that are about trauma that we have, and Bollywood,
Yeah.
mein to there's nothing.
There's
Basically.
nothing. There's nothing even
And
related to mental
Hollywood,
health.
I think in Hollywood, You Were Never Really Here, it's probably the best movie that comes when we talk about trauma. It's, I think, the way trauma was portrayed in this was really, really well done. And I think the best part about the movie for me was the visual imagery uh, of trauma. Like there was no one scene where, okay, let's sit down, where Joaquin Phoenix sitting down his mother, okay, I have trauma, listen to me. I have this, I have that. There's none of that. And I mean, you can make an argument saying that, yeah, it really works in some movies, and there can be some good dialogue with that. But I think visual imagery is much harder to do when it comes to trauma. So I think the director Lynn Ramsey, she's done that really, really well, showing visual imagery through trauma. Just imagine how hard it must be to actually direct that. So I can appreciate that. But when it comes to the actual movie, I think. It was acted really well, obviously. It's shot really well. The music point, actually, even I thought about it. It's very, and obviously, music is actually a very interesting tool to, it's a very important tool to, build up.
Express emotion and build up. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and yeah, that's what I feel. So we can go on to the next question now.
I think like the only thing, if we're talking about in Bollywood, something which even comes a little close is probably like, I think Highway can sort of cut it, because uh, yeah, there is like of course, there are some aspects in Highway.
Yeah,
And if you talk about mental health, then I think again another Alia Bhatt film would be, I think, Dear Zindagi.
it's not a good
But
one, but yeah.
again, yeah, it's not really a great film. But
We would
yeah,
like
it's
to, we were actually thinking, because to level this out, we wanted one Bollywood and one Hollywood. We always do that.
yeah,
We don't always talk about one thing because that's unfair. But
yeah,
it's actually sad when we, there might be movies about mental health. We just don't know because we weren't researching for this, but there's nothing for trauma. And I
yeah. There's
think
nothing for trauma.
trauma
Mental health,
equally
we
is
found. Yeah, mental health. We found another one, which was the film with Konkana Sen. I completely forgot its name.
death in the Goonj.
No, 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 not Death in the Goonj. The one about schizophrenia, which is a very good
Oh yeah,
movie
yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah. I forgot what it's
Uh,
called.
yeah.
But
1 minute. Yeah. 15 Park Avenue. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That is
yeah.
a very well done film
Mhm.
when it comes to mental health. I think that's a very good movie to watch.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
but
think it would be nice if you describe, like, if you explain what is schizophrenia for people who are like very.
Yeah. No. So that's not for this episode. We'll be
we'll come.
talking
Yeah,
when
we'll
we
make an
talk about
episode for
mental
that.
health.
Let me just
But
Yeah.
add something. Let
mhm.
me please. Like, even though we are trying to explain everything, even though we are trying to put forward our views, we cannot explain it well. And if
Yeah.
you want to know more about it from some people who may be much more learned about this one topic, we are going to link some videos down below. There is this amazing video by Crash Course which kind of puts it all up in just one 10-minute video, and you guys can go and watch that. Link is in
Yeah.
the description.
Yeah. Okay, so our next question actually comes to this very aspect that we have
This is
been
probably the
discussing.
most important question that we
Yeah, is
have.
probably the most important question that we have. Is there a difference between trauma and mental illness? I would like to start with Jasmine.
Obviously, this is what all we've been discussing till now. Like, mental health and trauma are different, but I think that there's a very thin line. That is why people are not able to understand with what is trauma and what is mental health, like how to classify it separately. But because past trauma can very easily lead to mental health issues, but again, it's not always necessary for a person having mental health issues to have past trauma, if you understand what I say. Yeah, I think that is the easiest way to differentiate between them. And obviously, there's no certain criteria till now, like we mentioned earlier, to differentiate between both of them. So yeah.
Okay.
I think it
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
So I think I would like to go to Janvi next. Janvi, what are your thoughts on this?
So I'll just so the way you asked the question, mental illness and trauma, and I think when it comes to mental illness, like the if you just dissect the words, it, it's trauma is something that is dictated upon you, that you experience because of the external factors. When it comes to mental illness, that is something which is within you, and it's not as much. Of course it is, and it's a very complex topic to talk about, but I'm just trying to be very general here. And but mental illness is something which is more, I think, in your, I won't say in your control because it's not in your control, but it's somewhat much more, centered towards you rather than being it the surroundings. So
Or,
with trauma, let's.
sorry to interrupt, but I think whatever Janvi is trying to say, from whatever she's trying to say, mental illness can be something which is personal, and trauma can be like what Jasmine already mentioned, could have a story behind it. So yeah, like in a broader sense.
Yeah, kind of in that
Yeah.
sense, but it's not just about have a story behind it. It's more about, it's more because of the surroundings, because of not necessarily the things you do, but the things which are done to you, if that makes sense. And this is, again, this is my understanding of it, and it can be a different thing for you. But again, and I'm generalizing a lot here because we can't just understand that topic very well. And mental illness is something which is more centered toward you. And yeah, I think that's my understanding of it, and that is why I feel like trauma and mental illness are very different thing, but mental health is an umbrella term for all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to ask Bhavya next about.
I think mostly both of them covered the entire thing and the idea of the thin line between mental health and then trauma. So yeah, I think we're good to go.
Uh,
I
just to just
Okay.
to just to
Avi,
point out here,
you have.
we're not trying to say both are very serious. Like
Of
both are
course.
extremely
Of course.
serious, and they need to be like we need to think
Discussed.
about
Yeah.
them, discussed here.
Yeah.
So we'll just go over. So like I think people normally have a confusion about the difference between mental illnesses and mental health. So I think Siddhant,
Yeah.
we can just go over that right now.
So yeah, as Avi mentioned, I pulled up this article which I found, and it's by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. They're this mental health organization which is in Rockville, Maryland, in the United States. And there was this report which I found that they had actually written, and there's this portion. There's this very short portion I would like to quote. It's under the heading of relationship between trauma and serious mental illness. And as we had mentioned before, there is a very thin line which distincts, which kind of separates both mental illness and trauma. So here it is written: evidence for an association between childhood trauma and serious mental illness is strong, and that there is very little doubt that individuals with severe mental illness report child trauma at a much higher rate than the general population. If any of our viewers would love to read or research more about it, we will be providing the link in the description, so you can definitely check it out from there.
Okay, so our last question to you guys would be, how exactly is trauma portrayed in these movies? We've touched upon it before when we're describing these movies, but we like to talk about it more since we don't want this to be a mental health episode. So, Jasmine, would you like to go ahead?
Okay, so overall in both the movies, I'd like to say this, that trauma is shown as such a delicate emotion that it can change the way you perceive your life or see things, and it can hence affect all the things. Like if it can affect you mentally, it can affect you physically, and it can affect what you do to others or how you behave with others. I think that's overall what it covers.
Okay, Bhavya.
so yeah, it mostly covers the personal relations and the family relations, and then it also talks about how so basically it talks about how family is there with you throughout with in whatever happens, and then it also like tries to portray how trauma is associated with your past experiences, and then how people who are there are still going to be there in present, but then you have to make sure that uh, like see, at the end of the day it tries to explain how trauma is going to still be there and people are also still going to be there, and then like people, like the person who's going through the traumatic experience should get going with both of them together in their life. So yeah.
Okay, Janvi.
Like to explain how exactly these movies portrayed trauma, I think the absolute concluding scene of You Were Never Really Here kind of portrays it really well. I won't go into the details, but I'll tell you that whatever Joe, who is the protagonist, is going through, whichever emotion he's going through, we can see him because we are this one omnipresent being in that universe, so we can see it. But I think this really interesting thing happens is that the music, the soundtrack that we were hearing kind of fades away, and the sound, the chatter of everyone present in that surrounding goes up and up and up till it builds up enough tension, and so a very climactic thing happens that I won't say. Go watch the movie to know. And like we see everybody just unfazed by it. Everybody's just going about their job. Everybody's just like they don't care. And then we see the waitress come and hand him the bill like nothing really happened there. And I think I thought that was really interesting to show how trauma, how a person who is experiencing trauma can go about their day, and nobody could notice. How a person could just, experience all kinds of emotions, horrible emotions in them, and nobody can identify or say or point out that, hey, dude, are you okay? Are you going through it?
But mostly, even if they try to understand their thing, most of the times they really can't help the person who is going through it. That was also one thing that was noticeable in that thing, because so there is this one scene you remember where someone asks him to click a picture, and then they start laughing and then like smiling and all, and then he's just sad standing there and then looking at them. So sometimes it's like the other person or the person who's looking at the person is not in a position to really understand what's happening, or if they try to understand as well, they're like not in a position to know how to help as well. So maybe that one thing was also shown in a way in the movie. That's what I
And no,
felt.
I didn't get your point exactly. Can you explain that again?
So basically what I'm trying to say is you're trying to say you can't see what a person is going through, right?
No, I didn't say you can't see it. I said that
Yeah.
that moment portrayed how it is easy to miss everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What I am trying to say is, even if you notice it, like sometimes people just don't know how to react. Like they just get going. They're like, okay, that person is sad, and then they get going. So, for example, even if the person who is there, who's giving the bill, maybe the cashier or whoever it is, even if they notice, they just don't do anything. That's what I was trying to say, and I was trying to say even that was portrayed in the thing. So yeah.
yeah. I kind of agree to what you were saying that. So the main thing I think, and this is something that both of those movies did right, is that we have seen people talk about it. People talk about their emotional state, people explaining what they feel, using the words in most creative ways to put up this picture of what they are feeling. And but that's not always the case in real life. Not everybody who goes through a traumatic experience can put it in words what they are feeling. So both of these movie kind of do that um, they, they 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 portray it in a visual manner for you to experience it with them, what they feel. I cannot think, like I don't know how I would go about my life if I had to experience everything Joe was experiencing in that moment. And I think his and this is a very dark statement to make, and I don't know if we will keep this in the final edit or not, but I kind of understood like why he was toying with the idea of the dropping his knife one time in the mouth, just drowning with his mother one time. And let me just mention that scene is cinematic genius. That water scene is just amazing.
That is
But
the best scene in the movie, man. The
it
shot.
is
Yeah.
it is. So yeah, I feel like these two movies kind of did a very amazing job in in showing what it means, like, because going through PTSD or going through or going or reliving a traumatic experience can be a horror movie. It can be a psychological thriller. You can kind of identify yourself being in there. So I think the portrayal in that sense was really interesting in both of them. This was the first time I saw what it means to have PTSD. I didn't hear about it, but I saw what it means to be.
Very interesting opinions here on the PopWind podcast. Now let's move on with Siddhant.
I mean, yeah, I think like all of you guys have covered it very well and covered most of the points. I think I just want to say a very small point, adding on to what Jhanvi said. Like, the fact that you can't see a lot of like the trauma that people are going through. I just want to say, just try and be like nicer to each other. Don't like try not to be shitty to each other. Because you never know like who's going through what. So I think my only takeaway from this entire thing would be just try and be nicer to the people around you. Don't try and be and because people are struggling
Not,
with yeah.
nothing really good, like nothing good will come out of people being
Exactly.
ever.
And people are struggling with their own demons, their own personal demons, which you may not know what they're going through. And for you, it might be easy to pick on them or target them, or they might be the butt of your jokes, and that might bring you pleasure, but you don't know what kind of pain you're putting that person through, right? So just don't be an asshole. I think that's all I would like to say.
I feel like we need to address one point here that this is what I felt. This movie in the beginning and somewhat maybe in the middle is very reminiscent of Joker. I think I'll explain
So I was
why.
thinking
There are
of all,
many.
yeah,
Huh?
even the mother's scene
Yeah,
or like, yeah,
yeah,
I was
but
I was
but
Yes,
but
this is
like
let
all
exactly
this
what I
time
was feeling while watching the
but
movie.
but
all
but
this
let
time was
me.
tempted to talk about Joker, but then I was like, okay, maybe we're just giving a popular example, and that's not what we are trying to do
No,
or
No,
no.
no,
describe.
Joker.
Let's
Joker is
no. Let's
not
actually let's actually talk about
just
that. That's why I wanted to bring this
okay.
topic up. And Siddhant and I discussed
But
this
yeah, go
before.
ahead. Yeah.
Joker. Let's just put this out there. It's not about trauma. There might you can say that there can be some instances of trauma, but it's more driving towards the mental health side. Now, many viewers or listeners might think that it's obviously about trauma, and but it's very
Kind
once you
of. So
actually
it kind
once
of
you
is. Like I won't say
that's what I'm saying. It kind of
there.
is,
There is a
but like
subplot.
when you compare it with human
Yeah, but
really
it's
here,
yeah,
it's it's
yeah,
it's very. I think Siddhant can
yeah.
explain it better.
Yeah, no, no, I don't think better, but like exactly what Avi said, exactly it is about mental illness,
Yes.
because from the very fact that he has like the card which he keeps showing people that he has those fits where he starts like almost choking while laughing, and he starts basically like laugh. It's a mixture of like pain,
Uncontrollable laughter.
yeah, uncontrollable laughter and choking at the same time. So they obviously don't define exactly what his problem is, but yeah, it is definitely mental illness. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Todd Phillips, I think, right,
yeah,
Ravi, I
Todd
forgot his
Phillips.
name. Yeah, Todd Phillips. So Todd Phillips himself said that this the movie Joker is not the comic book version of Joker. If you want to see a comic book version of Joker, you already have Heath Ledger doing that in The Dark Knight, right? Yeah. So basically, like I mentioned before, it's not exactly a comic book DC film. It is an experimental film which Warner Brothers did, where they have literally just taken a comic book character and portrayed him as having a mental illness or multiple mental illnesses, if you will, and at the same time he just goes through a lot of bad situations in life. So that's why the Joker film is more about mental illness than trauma, because he very clearly, like, I mean, maybe Janvi has a point, maybe there are like a few instances here and there, but it focuses mainly on mental illness rather than trauma. And we will also be talking about it in our mental illness episode. Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
guys, so it has been a really heavy discussion. Now, let's end this here. I hope you like this episode. Go follow us on Instagram at popwine_official. Also, like, subscribe, and comment what your thoughts are.
And share.
And we'll yeah, obviously share it with everyone so that they can also know the difference between, I hopefully they can understand these two terms, mental health, mental illness, and maybe trauma.
The point of this
So
episode being, it's not really more about the movie, it's more about our understanding of trauma. That's, I hope you
Yeah,
understood it
yeah,
through this episode, because that's what we're
exactly.
trying to do. But yeah.
yeah. We're just
Uh,
using film as a means to make you understand these concepts
Yeah.
better. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Also, we'll include some links below to the articles and research we have done, and other links in case someone needs help, helpline numbers
We'll
down below in the
go
description.
flying
Thank you
like
guys
a
for
bird
watching.
flying high in the sky up
Bye.
above. High, 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 high in the sky up above. High in the sky up above. High in the sky up above.